welcome to another live expert-led learning session at Human Leaders. So we've taken the time this month to really dive into communication from many perspectives, including how communication affects and empowers us personally, but also the ways communication can work against us to create barriers and disconnection in our relationships when we're not communicating effectively. How we communicate as leaders is critical, as it's our fundamental vehicle in creating trust, connection, and belongingness in our teams. We know through empirical research that employees who feel a sense of belonging and connection in their teams exhibit better happiness at work, they feel more engaged, and they're also less likely to have absenteeism and turnover intentions. So for organizations wanting to seriously address how to retain quality employees, we mustn't overlook leadership communication and behavior as a critical consideration here. In today's session, we are hosting a global leader in the cross-section between leadership behavior and effective communication. Louise Evans is the author of 5 Chairs, 5 Choices, a book and framework which gives us the tools for self-mastery, behavioral intelligence, and radical collaboration. So you might have seen Louise's TED Talk, which has garnered over 4.5 million views worldwide. Certainly, this was my first experience with Louise's work. And I still recall watching her move through each of the different narratives present in our minds in each of these chairs. And I distinctly recall thinking, oh my God, she knows exactly what I'm thinking. I was in awe of how precisely she pinpointed exactly how I felt and how I thought when I was being triggered in each of those areas. And since then, I've learned a great deal more about how to manage these triggers thanks to Louise's work. So Louise has taken her 5 Chairs framework global, from working with companies from Europe to North America and back again, from primary school kids to global boardrooms. And it's with much excitement that I welcome her here today to join our Human Leaders community. So the structure today will be more of a conversational style than a presentation from Louise. So we're going to get a real tactile feel for how the 5 Chairs model can help our behaviors improve our communication and really up-level our leadership skills at work. So welcome to Human Leaders, Louise. And without further ado, I'm actually going to pass over to my incredible co-director, Sally Clark, to kick off our session with our first question for Louise. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alexis. And so lovely to have you with us, Louise. We're really delighted to share this space with you today. I'd love to start by just hearing a little about your story and how you came to develop the 5 Chairs model.
That's actually quite a tender story now that I think of it, because it has quite a lot to do with my mother. And I didn't realize this, and I actually till much later, why I created the 5 Chairs. And it was because of the relationship I had with my mother, which was somewhat dysfunctional for a long time. There was this sort of love-hate relationship going on between me and her. And I spent a lot of time blaming her for this until I came to a realization, which is a bit late in life. I think it was around about 29 when I came to Italy. And I looked at other relationships which were not going, especially with men, to be quite honest, which were not going so well in my life, and thinking, no, maybe there's something wrong with me, which was very difficult to accept. But I read a book by Krishnamurti called In Search of Meaning, and that, you know how you have these mythical books that just change your life upside down. And I thought, oh my God, I have to do a lot of work on myself. And for the next 20 years, I went on a spiritual journey, basically. I was reading a lot of psychology as well. But this is where I met and studied with some very, very important people. And the main people that really did create a big shift in my dysfunctional behavioral patterns were Thich Nhat Hanh. I did some beautiful silent retreats with Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist monk. Then Eckhart Tolle, the German modern day philosopher who wrote The Power of Now. Extraordinary. All of the men that I was frequenting had a great sense of humor and very little ego. So it was extraordinary actually having the privilege to work with them. And then Marshall Rosenberg of Nonviolent Communication, which really did then, it was the turnkey. So whilst I was in this dysfunctional relationship with my mother, my behavior was a little bit difficult to manage. I mean, I spent a lot of my time in either the jackal or the hedgehog chair. They didn't have that name at that time. But I think what happened was, and I was walking around with a giraffe face, however, you know, a mask, masking it. And I think, so what happened is I decided I really needed to work on myself and to look very closely at why I did certain things and why I was suffering from jealousy, possessiveness, controlling people, and you don't live like that. I mean, you live half of your life in your own pocket. You don't get into the flow of your life. It was very painful. And I decided to break that spell. It took a long time, but that whole work took me about 20 years. And I thought, oh my God, after coming out the other side, because my mantra was, if you love someone, to set them free from sting. And when I ultimately managed, and that was the last person on the list of people I had to set free was my husband. And he was actually patient enough to stick with me in all the years that I was working on myself, because he trusted I would get there in the end. And then when that happened, it was extraordinary. I then got into my flow, but I'm a late developer. But it was terribly important to go on that journey, because I said, it cannot be possible. 20 years of my life I had to spend on actually altering some of my behaviors. I have to invent something to help people do it faster. So I think because of the influence that these main schools of philosophy and thinking and spirituality had on me, and also many others, the result, because you know, I didn't invent anything. All I did is reorganize it in the 5-chair model. So that's where it came from, basically. So thanks to my mother, who's still alive, she's 97, she's living in England. And I thank her every day now for giving me my chance to work on myself, and all the fights that we have had in the kitchen resulted in the 5 chairs. So that's basically it.
Wow. So firstly, I resonate with that deeply, Louise. And I think it's, you know, through our struggles and through our pain that we actually find a need to modify our behavior. And it's quite often when we come across these most remarkable, life-changing things that we develop. And certainly it's through the relationships in my life that I came upon your work as well. So with that said, Louise, I wonder, can you give us an idea then what exactly these 5 chairs are? And then perhaps we'll look at maybe giving everyone an idea of how they look and feel in a scenario. So would you mind starting with just giving us an idea of what exactly those 5 chairs are and how that model looks?
Well, it's quite simply, they act as a mirror to our daily behavior. I mean, you know, every morning we get up, we come into the world, and depending on how we get up, we have certain types of conversations, and depending on the quality of the conversations, they're going to have an impact on the person we're talking to, and that will then ultimately create the quality of the day that we are creating and the quality of our lives. But a lot of the time we're on sort of or on automatic pilot, and or we're not taking care of ourselves enough, because, you know, we all misbehave, because very often when we're under stress, but it's in those moments when we do misbehave that they have an impact on other people and our relationships and our lives. And it's really about, the 5 chairs is a way to help us catch ourselves, if possible, in the moment as we're about to misbehave, and ask ourselves that question is, wait a minute, who do I want to be? What chair am I sitting on at the moment? And where do I want to be? Where can I go? And even if you end up in the jackal chair going, and getting into one of those moments, which is, you know, quite simple, it's about just a minute. Do I want to do this? But that takes a lot of training, because you know how much our brain tricks us into that default reaction, that stimulus response reaction, especially if it's a habit which has grown over years. That is why we are getting it into schools at a very early age. We want to do it with kids from the age of 3 upwards to 14, and we're doing that in Canada so that they can learn early on to self-regulate, because we didn't learn that in our own educational systems. It should be one of the most important subjects on the curricula, is how do I become an excellent human being that understands how the whole human system is working, and especially the brain, and how the brain will hijack us unless we intervene. Because we've got old technology in the brain, like the amygdala, which triggers us so easily into fight and flight and freeze and all the behaviors. But we can intervene with our own brain. We can talk to our brain. We can have conversations with it. But it takes practice, it takes knowledge. And so that the 5 chairs there is there to invite people to just take a good look at themselves. And so that as much as possible can make choices which are going to lead them towards more healthy and productive behaviors, and therefore more happiness.
So you really mentioned there, Louise, though, that it's a lot about managing our triggers and our reactivity to the world around us. So what I'd love for us to do, because many of us in the room here today are leaders and lead teams, and there are a lot of triggers that happen in the workplace. So, for example, I'm in a team meeting, and say I propose a plan that I believe is really going to work, and I put so much time and effort and energy and emotion into this plan. I think this is a great plan. Yes. Then I take it to a meeting, and I have a colleague that totally shoots it down and shuts me down in front of all my peers. So for me, that definitely would probably be the most triggering thing that could happen to me in a situation, that level of public humiliation that I would feel around my idea. Can you maybe walk us through some of the different reactions that I might be going through here, depending on these 5 chairs that you've developed?
Yeah, and I love that idea. And I actually, whilst we do that, I'm going to show you what I use now, because, with COVID, I used to have the 5 chairs with the covers on them, and it's quite a theatrical type of training that we do. And it was like, oh my God, now what am I going to do? So with the help of IKEA, this is what now replaces the 5 chairs on stage. So I'm going to put them here by my side. There you go. And we can have a look, because I love these examples, because the 5 chairs is all about what you do in the moment. So somebody says, take your example, which I love. Somebody says, there you have been sweating away, you've got this great idea, and you and then somebody says, well, that'll never work. It's like slap around the face. Well, obviously in the jackal chair, which is the first thing that usually comes up, and by the way, I have to say, something that you don't know if you've seen the TED Talk is that there are also objects related to these chairs, which I have to introduce you to right now. So this one here is the jackals. So I use these, actually I use them in companies as well, because we all have a kid inside us. So when we're in the jackal chair, and this is from Nonviolent Communication, because Marshall Rosenberg released the copyright of the jackal and the giraffe into the world. So in the jackal chair, you see your thinking. So it's something like, who the hell do they think they bloody are? Excuse me, I spend all this time and I present it and they shoot me down. It's like working with a bunch of bloody dinosaurs. What is the point of working in a company like this? They can't even listen to new ideas because they feel threatened all the time. So, we go into the rant and the raving, which is normal, I don't think we will ever stop that. And I think that the art here is the jackal's going to come up and go, yes, and we have to look at the jackal and say, gotcha, see you, hear you, etc. Not now, though. Because obviously you bring in the jackal into the world, and then you're going to create the tension immediately. So you get attack, defense, attack, attack back, whatever. So it's like, see you, boy. Okay, down, not now, down, down, down. So that's the first chair that could happen. It depends how you go in, because the other one, you could be going into the yellow chair, which is more about you know, depending on who you are, it's more about, yeah, okay. So as usual, my ideas never run. I mean, what is wrong with me? Nobody listens to me, and they're probably right. You know, I never have any good ideas. So what is the point? I mean, they're right. I might as well just shut up. It's probably the best thing to do, and keep my ideas to myself, because, oh my God. So that's what happens in, you know, we go into basically now. The fun of this chair is that whilst we're doing this, the object is, I'm not good enough, you know. I mean, this is it here. Nobody understands me. Nobody appreciates me, you know. I mean, what is the, why do I bother? You know, I'm just not intelligent enough. I'm not competent. I'm not enough. That's just, so the object here is the self-flagellation whip, which gets, was a lot of attention in the training room. We had a lot of fun with that. So you can go in from either way, you know. But the next chair, which is terribly important, is the meerkat chair, and it's probably the most important of all the chairs. It's the gravitational point where you switch from the lower chairs of the attack and the self-doubt through the meerkat chair. And here we go into more about, because this is the magic wand, and this is the object of the meerkat chair. And this is more about, okay, take a deep breath, count to 5. You can see that you're beginning to react, so just take it easy. And I don't want to go into the jackal chair, so let's not jump to conclusions or make any assumptions. Just take a deep breath and pause. Now, this chair can happen in a few milliseconds, but we have to train the mind to jump in as we see the emotions in our bodies, because our bodies never lie to us. They send us messages. We need to learn to really listen to them carefully. And once we connect to that, that's the moment to come in, take that pause, and come into a centeredness. Yeah, and this is where we're going into the leadership, where you're finding your internal stability, your balance, your emotional intelligence, your self-controlling, your self-mastery begins here. So there's so much work to do on this chair. And when we do a full course, we spend like sometimes a day or a session on each chair, digging down into it to understand the power. So we're going into transformation here, basically. And once we have that stability, and only then can we go into the more virtuous chairs, which are the dolphin and the giraffe. So once you've taken your breath, you know, you have your moment of magic to help you stabilize yourself and come into some mindfulness. Then we can move on to the dolphin, and the object for the dolphin chair is this, the mirror. And then we go into actually full nonviolent communication in this chair. And it's about, and in this situation, it would be, okay, the facts are that somebody has said to me that idea will never work. So we're really moving, the meerkat chair is helping us get into a place where we're coming into a rational mind. We're dealing with the facts of a situation, and we know we have a choice. And if the choice is to move towards staying in a situation or staying in a conversation to find some agreement, then it's about what's going on in me. So once we're in the dolphin chair, it's about, okay, the fact is this, I'm feeling a bit upset by what that person has said, because I would like, what I need is for them to really listen to me and really explore my idea in greater depth. So I'm going to ask them and hold them, and I'm going to dog for my needs. I'm going to say, I have some choices here. I can ask them a question. I can say, can you tell me exactly what you don't like about that idea? Because I've thought about this in depth, and I really think I'd really like to have a discussion about what you feel will not work. So you go into full level of assertiveness, because one of the main characteristics of this chair is your ability to speak up. And obviously, if you have learned at home in your family to be a hedgehog, and not to speak up for fear of being judged or fear of the jackal, then that can be very, very difficult. That's a life journey in itself to become assertive. But it's the dolphin that is actually saying, take the courage, speak up. You might not be popular, but it's what is your life about? If you want to be true to yourself, because obviously in the chair of the dolphin, you are really working on understanding what are your values, because your behaviors will then be a demonstration of those values. So it's a chair where we become, it's powerful leadership, basically. It's the self-awareness, the self-responsibility, self-actualization, also the self-witness part of leadership as well. So you're the influencer, you're the mentor, the inspirer, the influencer. This is the role of leadership, which is to push leadership into the world. And so when we do courses on leadership, it's about, you know, where are you at the moment with your leadership? Because we're all across the chairs. It's not necessarily you start in the jackal and you go into the giraffe. It's about, in any moment, we can be triggered into one of these. And what is the best choice that we need to make? Because sometimes we need to be a mentor, and other times we need to be a coach. So that is the choice. Do I want to be the dolphin? And I stand up for my ideas and for my rights, and I speak into the world, and I take risks, and I show the courage. Or do I go into the last chair, which is this one, the giraffe? Oh, by the way, the reason that I chose the dolphin and the mirror is because if a dolphin looks into a mirror, it sees itself. There are only a few animals that are actually self-aware. The elephant is the other one too. They actually see themselves, and their brain and intelligence is very close to that of humans. So and also the dolphin has an incredibly sophisticated system of communication. So it seems to be the perfect animal to represent us coming into the world. And also the colors of the chairs are from the chakra system, the Indian chakra system. So the red is starting out in the genital areas. We move up into the solar plexus, which is in the stomach area, then into the heart, the heart chakra, which is the green, then into the chakra of the voice. Beautiful, that one, the blue one, and then up into the crown and the third eye, which is that of the, just slipped in. That's where the colors come from. So in the giraffe chair, which is the tough chair, and my God, do we need that right now in the world, especially here in Europe. The empathy chair, you know, when we're going to servant leadership, we're going into kind leadership, you're the visionary, your strategic partner. It's the compassion, the empathy, the tolerance, the inclusion, the big picture. Wow. Getting ourselves into empathy before we go into, which is the pull leadership, before we go into dolphin, is not straightforward at all. I mean, if somebody's saying to you, you know, that's a stupid idea, it doesn't come naturally to think, I wonder why they're saying that. There must be a reason. I need to understand what is behind that, because there could be fear of change, because what I'm presenting as an idea could actually, you know, completely change the processes. You know, people are resistant to change, so I need to bear that in mind, and I need to ask some questions to understand what their needs are. So then we're going into complete needs awareness. We're getting out of the language of I'm right and you're wrong, which is typical of jackal, and you're going into the dolphin and the giraffe is what are my needs and what are their needs, and let's have a negotiation around needs which are universal, and there's no right or wrong there. And conversations change completely, but you have to intervene in your own mind and ask those questions. If they're reacting like that, why and what are their needs? Because I need to connect that. And then I have to be connected to my own needs, and then we have that conversation. But we're not very good at jumping into the giraffe chair before we do anything else. And if you do that, if you connect to somebody else, you go out of your own ego. And then the chances are that the understanding happens, and then you can move forward. Because in any conversation, we're really trying, the intention is to get to the end of the conversation and find a new way of moving forward together. But if getting to Jackal, it's all over, because Jackal closes doors. You know, now it's over. So, you know, this is the challenge, basically.
Yeah, that's wonderful, Louise. Thank you so much for walking us through that. That was very, I really recognize myself, and that especially I think in the hedgehog chair is probably my go-to when I feel attacked. Yeah, and it's definitely, yeah, even when you're showing the sort of the whip, I really sort of almost felt viscerally that's that self-flagellation that happens when you get into that space and you really shut down, which just,
Yes.
you know, inhibits completely our capacity to continue to connect and to stay open to finding that resolution in the conversation that you mentioned. I also loved, I didn't realize that the chairs were based on the chakra system colors. That's beautiful, really resonates. So I'm wondering if we can zoom in a little bit on, so for example, if we are, we're in that situation and we notice that a team member is having a response from the jackal or from the hedgehog, what specific strategies might we be able to use, or language that we can employ to really to bring their awareness to this and to be able to move forward to create that space in the conversation to understand one another better?
Yes, I love that. It's really about, because in the model, you know, it's about how do you manage these two chairs up here? Because when you're conversing with meerkats, dolphins, and giraffes, life is pretty productive. I think, again, we are all jackals and we are all hedgehogs. You know, even though some people don't want to admit that they're hedgehogs, or that they're jackals. So the first element, if somebody in your team is behaving like a jackal, like full-on aggressive behavior, the empathy part is really important, is just connecting to that energy, the negative energy, is saying, okay, this happens. You know, I mean, negative behavior in a person can be a one-off, it can be a regular thing, or it can be chronic. And it's really understanding what it is in your team member, at what level we are, because then you have to go into very powerful feedback culture here. And if somebody is on a rage, then you have to come in as a dolphin and just stop them in their tracks. That energy has to stop. And then there are various things that you can use. I mean, you can either decide to make an observation about their energy, is you're speaking with a very loud voice, I need to stop you there. Or you say, what is going on with you right now? I mean, very often, one of the most powerful ways of intervening in anything is by asking someone a question, because that is a dopamine kick for everybody. The human being, when they're asked a question, has to answer it, because we become the center of attention of the question, and it actually does create this neurochemical, which is dopamine, and we then actually prepare ourselves for the answer, which means we come into slightly greater rationality. And so that is a help. So often, one thing is to intervene with the question, especially with aggressive behavior. That's one possibility. It's easier to manage a jackal and to lower the intensity of aggression than it is to manage a victim, because managing a victim means handling with care. Because if you give feedback in a way which is misread, which often a victim will do, is you see, even you're criticizing me now, and feedback is not meant as a criticism, but it's meant for growth, then it's about going to a whole script, which is going to help that person understand that you are supporting them, but not mothering them, because that's another issue. Is, you know, with feedback, it's about you can do crescendo with feedback. You can go in at the understanding level, but if the behavior continues, then you have to turn the volume up, and you have to have an adult to adult conversation rather than a parent to a child. So, you know, sometimes we are guilty of having parent to child conversations with victims, which doesn't always help. So there's a lot of scripting that has to take place from those chairs as you bring a person's attention. I mean, working with kids, it's so much easier because they get it immediately. But working with adults, you have to go through layers and layers and layers and layers of conditioning. And this is what we have to remember, to be patient. And sometimes we're really impatient with one another. We expect people to change because we're giving them one feedback. It doesn't work like that. You know, it takes time and it takes perseverance. So a lot of it is about, if you can read yourself well, and if you are connected to yourself well, then the chances are you're going to be so much more connected to other people because you have a deeper understanding and because you've developed the empathy. And empathy is so important if we're going to help each other. I hope that answered.
Yeah, absolutely, Louise. And, you know, I heard a few things there. The first one is obviously when we're recognizing someone in either the jackal or the hedgehog, so the attack or the self-doubt, it's really important as a leader that we don't allow ourselves to be triggered into the same response. And I certainly know, you know, as a young leader myself, when I have someone who feels like they're attacking me, my ego's immediate response is to go into defense mode as well. So I think for a leader that wait and detect is so important.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I love the meerkat, because, you know, what happens is when somebody is attacking you, going blah, 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 instead of going rah, 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 as well, it's like, can you tell me why you said that? Can I just go back to what you said? Because that's really interesting. When you learn to do that, it is so powerful, because of course the jackal goes up and says, ah! And you say, down boy, okay, not now. And then question is like, wow, whew, that hit me. I mean, it's not, I often want to say things like, wow, that's hit me between the head. Tell me a little bit more though, I'm interested. And then you open up the other person. It's like saying, it's like in Japan, the Japanese, when they have this incredible technique of when they're in an argument. One of the techniques is they take, like if you're in the kitchen, one of them will take a plate and smash it on the ground. I mean, that's presence of mind, number one, to do it, and you break it. But the other person is slapped out of their state, because we're, you know, when the jackal takes over, we are out of our minds and we're not thinking rationally. So when you do something like that, or you even say, oh, I forgot to do something. I mean, these are strategies, but it's incredible what happens to the other person. You bring down the intensity of aggression, and then you move into a more manageable conversation. But this takes practice, it takes remembering, it takes remembering as well.
Yeah, I guess, and that, as you said, that awareness that we are in one of those chairs. We're either in the jackal with them, or perhaps we're in the hedgehog. And so getting ourselves into that meerkat chair to wait and reflect and then start to detect what's going on. So I love that. And now, Louise, I know you mentioned as you were speaking there that you mentioned that you'd done some work with kids, and I know that you have recently introduced the 5 chairs into the schools program in some schools in British Columbia in Canada. Now, I would love to know more about this. And what I'd also in particular love to know is that, do you find these concepts harder or easier to convey to children when compared to adults, and maybe some reasons why that might be the case for us?
I love that, because you know, I was in the Ukraine. This was before the war, and I was working with some teachers in the Ukraine, and with a lovely friend who has 4 children, and I was speaking to one of her daughters who was 5, and I literally explained the 5 chairs in like 3 minutes. And after the explanation, she looked at her mum and she said, "Mom, I spent all my time in the jackal and the hedgehog chair. I want to be a dolphin." And it was like, oh my God. So what's happening is, well, the first project was actually in Australia, in Victoria, with this wonderful person, Rosalind, it was the Derinia Primary School. And she started working with kids, and we developed some materials with using art. And she was asking, actually we changed the the jackal into a crocodile, because there are more crocodiles than jackals in Australia. So it was yes, it was draw a crocodile. So they would draw a crocodile. What do crocodiles do? They attack. What does that look like? What do you ever do that? Do you ever attack your friends? And they go, oh, yeah. Well, when do you do that? Well, and how do you feel? How do you feel before you attack? And then how do you feel after you have attacked? And the last question, which is so powerful, is what impact does it have on your friendship? So working at that level with kids is extraordinary. And in Canada, we're working with the Pythagoras Academy, which is an independent school in British Columbia, it's near Vancouver. And the principal of the school, fantastic, Michael, he wrote to me and said, I love the 5 chairs, I want to bring it into the school. So we did that. I went over and I trained 10 teachers in the methodology, and they are now developing beautiful materials, and they're going to be testing it for 3 years. But already, he's great, because whenever there's problems with bullies, he brings them into his office, and there are 5 chairs set up, and he takes them through the chairs. And you see bullies saying, oh, I didn't know I had a choice. I thought I always had to be a jackal, so I can be a dolphin instead. So, and they would say things like, whenever I was attacked by somebody else, and I would sit in the jackal chair, but now I want to go to the meerkat. So it's very fast with children. You know, they get it very quickly. They connect to the animals. And then it's about how do you, and do you know what? Another thing I think which is very powerful is that in the morning now, we've devised this technique, actually would be really good to do in organizations, in teams, is when you come into a team meeting, I'm just putting some things on here to show, is getting into that self-awareness, the self-regulation, is as you go into life, as the kids go into school, the teacher does this and says to the kids, okay, so where are you? And the children are learning to express themselves and say, you know, if I look at myself right now, I'm feeling a bit hedgehoggy. Okay, so let's see, what do you want to do about that? Because, you know, with these 2 chairs, it's about how do I get, you know, how do I sit with them and understand what's going on? Or in the jackal is, how can I spend as little time there as possible and move out of that? Because we're never going to stop judging and complaining and blaming, all of those toxic behaviors that us humans have, but we can turn the volume down on them. So this is the idea, is kids are learning to say, no, this morning I feel like a dolphin. What does that look like? Oh, well, I feel confident and I feel blah, 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 blah. So this is, you know, the beginning of a very sort of natural way for them to actually take responsibility for how they're being in the world and give them choices. So fabulous work. I mean, it reduces me to tears sometimes when you see the comments that kids make around this. So we're trying to work there with future leaders, you know.
I'm sure you are. I'm sure that work is certainly having an impact on their capacity to communicate and to be, you know, to become future leaders. It's really exciting.
Yeah. Well, actually, one thing I had to be very careful about, because first we work with the teachers, and the teachers use it on themselves actually to make sure that they're leading well, because you can be triggered, you know, how kids will trigger you. Hello. Then the kids learn it, but we have to be very careful, because, you know, I did say, look, we've got to be careful. We can't have kids going home and saying to their parents, to their fathers, like, or mothers, you're a real jackal, in jackal language, you know, because we don't want anybody saying, hey, what's my child learning at school? What's all this stuff about jackals and hedgehogs and all the rest of it? I'm spending good money to send my kids. So I said, you know, we have to do work with the parents as well. And so we've done seminars with the parents so that they know the model. So ultimately, with the teachers, with the kids, and with the parents, we work on the community. That's the whole idea. We sort of create a language which is familiar to everybody, and so you can say, "Daddy, you're being a jackal," and hopefully, then Daddy can say, "Yeah, absolutely right. Okay, thank you for the feedback."
I think you know, that's so wonderful. Yeah, it's giving people the language to talk about these emotional responses that we have, rather than denying that we're having them And I think for many people, certainly for myself growing up, there was just so little awareness of it, so little space to shine light on what our reactions were and what was happening in our bodies and emotionally, and the connection between that and behavior. So it's empowering them at such a young age with that language, I think is just wonderful. So you mentioned earlier that you sort of had this transition from obviously going into organizations and being able to work in, you know, in situ with people and doing workshops, and
Yes.
obviously in the last couple of years the transition to online.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit how that transition has been, and whether interacting remotely has impacted or changed your work or your view on the 5 chairs?
Yeah, it was with COVID. I mean, it was just shocking. I remember 2 years ago, like in 1 week, it was like I lost 80% of our work, because the 5 chairs is a very theatrical thing, and we get people sitting in the chairs and feeling the energy of the chairs, and we move the chairs and all the rest of it, and say, oh my God. But then I thought, wait a minute. I mean, if you've never done it in the training room, you don't know. So what we're working on with the 5 chairs online is edutainment. So it has to be transformational, this work. And so what we've designed is now a series of webinars where we deep dive into each of the chairs, and we have all the props and everything. And like we have 1.5 hour webinar, and then the 2-week break where people go and live the life of a jackal, watch their jackals, work on their jackals, you know, and then we go in and do the hedgehog, and then they explore the hedgehog, do the reading, you know, do the exercises. And over a period of 10 weeks, it's quite a transformational program, because then by the last webinar, they get into the giraffe, they have the whole model. But so in 10 weeks, the feedback is actually I am changing. I am beginning to really look at myself. So I'm delighted about that, because obviously when now I can work with large audiences of, you know, I've just done a course on inclusion with a company called Pomelato, which is in part of the Caring group. They're a luxury jewelry group, and I did it with 300 people, and they were then going online, and it was like, oh my God, yes, this is the impact that I would like to have with people. So right now it's actually helped a lot, and so we can do the hybrid version, but we can do anywhere in the world. I've done quite a lot of work with America as well, in all sorts of different contexts, which I could never have imagined, because we really go across the board with the tool. So I'm actually secretly now glad, I'm not for humanity, but glad it happened to us, because of what I can do with the 5 chairs, which we weren't doing before. So yes, and we make it fun, but we go as deep as we need to as well. So happy about it.
Yeah, that is exciting to see that it is, you know, in one way been impactful in the delivery, and I'm sure also impactful in how people's behavior is affected by the transition to online work as well, because we're not feeling one's energy when we're not directly in front of them and those sorts of things. So I'm sure that's actually impactful as how we interpret each other's behavior as well. And I wanted to ask one more question. So I guess going back then to the chairs, we've got the red chair is our jackal, and that's our pack chair. The yellow is hedgehog, which is our self-doubt. We've got the meerkat in green, which is wait. The dolphin is the blue, detect. And lastly, yeah, the purple being the giraffe, which is our connect chair. So as a leader in an organization, and you've really touched on this to a large extent already, Louise, but what do you think, in your opinion, would be the most important chairs for us to sit in most regularly in a leadership position? And maybe how do they depend on the context of some of the situations we face in leadership as well?
Yeah, I think with the model, the first thing we have to do is really deepen our knowledge around the jackal and the hedgehog, because those are inside us. And those, when we're under pressure, leaders are under pressure, the tendency will be to speak from those chairs. So we have to get a deep understanding of those, and understand ways of actually working on them within ourselves, yeah, so that we can also manage jackal and hedgehog mentality in our teams as well. So terribly, terribly important. Then it's all about the ability to cultivate the meerkat, which is absolutely foundational to move into what is situational. I mean, it's about reading the context, and it's about, do I need to be empathetic here? Do I need to go into coach mode? Do I need to deeply listen? Do I need to recap? Do I need to understand? Are those the skills that are required for this moment? Or do I need to drive? Do I need to speak my truth? Do I need to challenge status quo? Do I need to have the courage to speak up? Do I need to empower people to delegate? Then I'm in the dolphin chair. So depending on how you answer that question is, where do I need to be now? What is the most virtuous behavior I need to cultivate in this moment? Then you go into that. And when we do the training, we obviously go into deep dive of what does leadership look like in this chair? What does leadership look like in that chair? And the more you practice it, you click into it, because that's the idea ultimately is, as you have the chairs in front of you, it's, oops, no, wait a minute, that was pretty jackal. I need to get out of that. Let's move into at least a deep breath, wait, and move. And what do I need to do here? Do I need to assert myself, or do I need to empathize? And then you start playing, or do I need to empathize first and then assert, depending on what the situation is. So very much a situational thing. Well, obviously, in these, the top chairs are the ones that we want to stay in. However, I do underline it's terribly important to understand how the jackal and the hedgehog works in us and in other people in order to manage those behaviors.
Just to clarify there as well, Louise, because I know when I first saw the chairs, my interpretation was that they were a little chronological, but that's not the case, is it?
Thank you for asking that. No, you can be all over the place. I mean, you might wake up in the morning and feel like a complete giraffe, and then you get in the car. And in the space of 1 second, you become a jackal. It's, you know, and you think, oh my God, you know, and then you might think, no, just to calm down. So you get into meerkat, and then maybe get another phone call and you think, I've got to step up here, get into dolphin. So we're all over the place. But what we're trying to do is spend less time in the red and the yellow chair in order to make us more effective in life in general. So that's the idea, is turn the volume down on those two chairs and turn the volume up on the other.
And I know I might be repeating myself a little here, but I love that you also focus on acknowledging that the jackal and hedgehog chair is there, that we're not trying to sort of pretend that those things don't exist and sort of, you know, just flee immediately to, I've got to be a dolphin, but really acknowledging and almost giving some space to that. Can you, am I sort of seeing that correctly?
This is, you know, the jackal isn't all bad. I mean, you know, jackal leadership is about crisis management, basically, is the crisis director. And you know, the healthy behaviors, if you want, of the jackal chair could be financial stability, profitability. It's about, you know, being oriented only on results. Now, part of this is necessary in the jackal chair. It's when you only concentrate that we get into trouble. So, if you want to destroy a relationship, the jackal chair is perfect for that. But it comes up. It can happen. You might actually decide this is it. I am out. I do not want to work for this company anymore because for these reasons, this and that, I'm leaving. So you consciously break. I mean, that's not true actually, because that's actually a dolphin. Because let's be honest with you, when you're in the jackal chair, you're pretty unconscious. So it's mainly the survival chair. So if you jump out and attack another person because they're attacking your child, that's good. However, we're trying to stay away from the jackal chair as much as possible.
And I think that's also probably important, that ultimately the behavior of the jackal chair is even if it looks ugly in its manifestation, the motivation is often for us to survive. It's coming from a theoretically healthy place. Absolutely.
Security, safety, it's the lowest level on Maslow's needs, universal needs. Whereas the giraffe we're moving in servant leadership, you know, when we have a purpose and we're leading into the world because we've taken all the other evolutionary steps, let's say.
Wonderful. Now, I think we're about ready to open up to some Q&A. So if people have questions that they'd like to put in the chat to pose to Louise, and Alexis and I can read them out. And I selfishly have a question while you're typing your questions into the chat. Louise, I'd love to know, you mentioned that you studied with the great Buddhist master Thich Nhat Hanh, and I'm just wondering, how do his teachings sort of impact your work in a corporate environment?
Well, number one, it's desperately sad that he's no longer with us. I mean, it was only a few weeks ago that he left this world, and that was a great loss. I was on one of his retreats. He has a silent retreat. You do it for a week, and you have noble silence, which lasts all day and all night until in the afternoon, where you can talk for an hour and a half. Beautiful work. And I think one of the most and many beautiful messages that I got from him is about managing your mind. And it's about tracking your mind activity, because he works a lot on mindfulness, obviously, and meditation, etc. But it's about, if you first, it's being in contact with your body. So the more we are sensitive to the way our body reacts, because the body doesn't lie to us, but the brain does all the time. The more you are in contact with your body and you see a shift in energy, you learn with his teachings to connect to that. You watch the tendency towards negative reaction, then you go into your mind and you ask yourself, where am I? Am I here? Am I in the past, or am I in the future? And it is so powerful, because often if we're in the future, we're very often in a world which doesn't exist, but we're fantasizing about things. We could also be worrying about things. There's anxiety. If you're in the past, that's over. So we're ruminating over things, sometimes thinking, I should have done this, and getting into the language of shoulds, but we're not in the present. So you learn about the psychological effect of being in the present and in the past, and how to manage that in a practical way. Now, if you're psychologically living there, then it can really upset your present. If you're practically living there, and it's about, I can organize my future, and I can think about my past in hindsight with a tranquil mind. But if I'm living anxiety of the past and also of the future, that is going to have an immediate impact on how I am in the present moment. So it's this beautiful practice of, you feel the body, it comes, where am I? Where am I? I'm in the future, come back. Come back. What are you thinking about? I'm thinking about that relationship. Or come back. And when you feel steady, think about it in a steady way, in a practical way. So it is literally that idea of come back here, because there's no sufferance in the present moment. And when you start living that, because it is so true, then your life changes radically. But you then have to practice the mechanism of saying, where are you? Past, future, what are you feeling? Come back. So I think that was the biggest lesson, which has never left me, and I use on a regular basis.
That to me is such an incredible insight, Louise. And while you were speaking there, in particular, two things stood out. And that was this sort of idea that when we're living with thoughts of the future self is when we potentially can start those mitigating or self-defensive behaviors, which to me sounds a little like the jackal. And then the next part of that was this idea of living in the past. And I think that to me screams a little bit like the hedgehog, because so much of our self-doubt is in some way connected to things that have happened in our heart in the past that perhaps have contextually changed, but we're responding to them in the same way in the present moment. So it sounds like those teachings have also very much influenced the chairs to an extent.
Yes, no, absolutely. I mean, that whole, when you look into the whole area of self-doubt and the whole area of should have, is an enormous. I mean, we seem to write contracts with life, and I have tried to eliminate the word should from my life, because that drags us back into, as you say, hedgehog. So everything you say is absolutely true.
Yeah, we've had a
I'm
great
looking at
comment. Yeah, I've
yeah,
got a great
I'm
comment
looking at it.
from Jen. I'll
Yes,
just share with you. So she's observed,
yes,
I can't help but overlay polyvagal theory over this. As you said, jackal
yes,
and hedgehog behaviors, survival instinct activation. And
absolutely.
I love it. I have a mantra, all behavior is need driven. So it's helpful to bring curiosity to myself and to others' behavior to get out of the autopilot unconscious to consciousness. Great
I love
observation.
that. That ventral vagal activation is so, it's about bringing that, the breath is even just a sharp in breath, and then the release is, if we remember to do that, then it has an enormous impact on how we decide to show up in the world. But thank you for making that point, Jen. It's that control of the breath is beautiful. Needs driven, yeah. What is the other person? See, the difference is saying what is not what is wrong with that person, but what does that person need? Is again a life-changing thing, which I learned through nonviolent communication. What does my child need when they're going "Bah!" at me, for example, rather than "Will you shut up?" And it's so easy to jackal. And you need a lot of energy, actually, gentle energy, to be in the tough chairs, the bigger chairs, because you can't do empathy if you're upset. Self-care and self-compassion.
Absolutely. And Jen's made a beautiful point here as well. She said it's about regulation before reasoning. And I think that very much speaks to the purpose of the meerkat chair. When we notice ourselves in these chairs, it's not about trying to snap ourselves straight into that point of like higher decision making, but to allow ourselves the grace to move through the regulation of our nervous system, to give ourselves the space to move into those chairs, and doing so in a way that I think is self-compassionate. And I know in my own personal journey, being someone who is an achiever, quite typically, it can be very frustrating when we revert to our old behavior patterns. And I certainly know, as someone who is developed a lot of mindfulness practices and also really try to have those influence my communication, you can become very frustrated at yourself when you revert to these conditioned patterns that stem from the jackal and from the hedgehog. So I think even on an individual level, the importance of allowing some space for yourself.
Thank you for saying that, because we're talking about deep self-compassion for ourselves and self-care. And we have also developed a process, a self-coaching process, where you put yourself through the chairs. And you have a set of questions to when you feel, here I go, just about to misbehave, or I have misbehaved. And you sit down and you go through the chairs and you reach clarity. And then you can go back and have one of those courageous conversations that you need to have with the person, because you've done the work. But it's about the chairs will guide you through the work that you have to do to clear up the toxicity and to bring in the clear thinking, to have that conversation that will then put things right. Hopefully. So,
and Louise, we had a question here as well come through from one of the community members, and they wanted to know at what sort of point in your life that you felt you started to become self-aware of the need to change. I know quite often for many of us, there might be perhaps a traumatic experience or a relationship experience. Or what was the real trigger for you when you said, okay, whatever I'm doing isn't working, now's the time to change?
Oh my God. I mean, quite a few. I mean, I remember I was thinking, why can't I hold a relationship down with a man for more than 2 years? What's wrong with men? And then I will never forget this. I was sitting in my first flat in Florence here, because I live in Florence. And the thought came up, and the thought was, well, maybe there's something wrong with you. And it all started there. And I thought, bloody hell. Oh my God. And then it led to a whole load of, then I started all the work I ever did, the best investment I've ever made is in all these courses that have taught me to be an acceptable human being now. And also discovering my inner child. I remember discovering my inner child in a cafe in London, would you believe it? And there was this little voice in my stomach, and I still know where it's positioned, saying, help. Because I used to bash myself, that I would be competitive with myself and I would criticize and judge myself. And then suddenly this little voice came up, and it was like looking up saying, please help me. It was like I was never, ever, I really think we should all go off and marry ourselves first before we marry another person. You know, go to an island somewhere, desert island, buy a beautiful ring and say everything that we say to another person to ourselves. And then when we do that, when we treat ourselves like that, then we can get married to somebody else because we'll be ready.
I love that idea, Louise. I was actually recently thinking we need to maybe make some vows, some lifelong vows to ourselves before we make them to other people. I think that's a beautiful observation. Yeah. Thanks for sharing your experience.
Thank you. I see, Harish, you have asked who the Buddhist coach is. Of course, I will write all of these references down of Thich Nhat Hanh and Eckhart Tolle, etc. Absolutely right. It's fabulous, fabulous work that they've done. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think just see if anyone has any further questions or anything they'd like Louise to speak to, just pop it in the chat.
And I can also answer them offline if people need to go. So that's no problem at all.
Thanks, Louise. So I think right now you mentioned you're using the webinars and reaching out to organisations. That way, you also mentioned the work with schools and with kids, which is so exciting. Where can people find you, and where can they find more about what you're doing and how you're impacting the world?
Well, there's the website, and I think you'll probably send on the information. Yeah, it's easy. It's www.thefivechairs.com. So be in touch. I mean, I love people being in touch with me and asking, you know, tell us more about it. I love setting, you know, co-authoring courses for people. As I say, it's really easy to set up a course now at distance. So if you need help with your teams or anything, please just call me. You know, I'll leave the phone, you will leave my phone number. I've written this book, which is 5 Chairs, 5 Choices. It's very practical. You know, and it really is, how do you manage the chairs, or how do you develop the top chairs, and how you down regulate the other chairs. So that's a point of reference that could be of help. But you know, I'm so open to hearing from anybody and helping people, and my mission is to get the mission of the 5 Chairs right now is a set of 5 chairs in every workplace and every home. Is, you know, and this is what I'll be working on for the next, well, however long I can live, basically.
I just think isn't that wonderful? And I can hardly fathom how incredible the impact would be on lives, on relationships, if we were able to get to that point.
Yeah, you know, it's been absolutely fabulous working in factories. We had an amazing experience once where a company came and said, right, we want to put this across 12,000 people in 14 different countries. And it was like, whoa, okay. And I thought, well, this is an amazing test of how universal it can be. So, I mean, this was a dream come true. So this company was based in Belgium. I ended up going to Pakistan, Ethiopia, Turkey, all of Europe, basically. We have tested the 5 chairs across all cultures, and it's universal. And there is a little bit of tweaking which needs to happen sometimes when we're in the Japanese culture or Asian cultures, where speaking up is not such an obvious task to do, and there are issues there. But it's about sensitizing the model to the context. But that was an experience of a lifetime, I have to say. So it is universal, and I designed it to be very accessible. So and I've forgotten your question. So sorry, Sally. What did you ask me?
It was I think just that impact, and I think that's so wonderful that you've been able to now have the lived experience of seeing how it really does translate across cultures, languages, backgrounds, and clearly age as well.
And also it's very good for teams, because once you get the language in the team, then it's a non-threatening way of giving feedback between peoples. And what we love to do is get it into the leadership team and then take it down at least to middle management. I mean, middle management, which really is the middle squeeze, because when we've done that in the past, people looking up at the organization see the changes and they say, oh, okay. And so once the change happens in the leadership team, you take it down into the second line, and then you have a real shift of culture, which is, again, one of the things that we're trying to do as much as possible.
Yeah,
So,
that really resonates. I think for me, as a with background in burnout, just seeing how incredibly important culture is for our sort of daily experience of how and where we work, and you know, those day-to-day interactions that we have, it's so determining. So that's really wonderful to see that impact that it can have, to sort of, you know, imbue through the organization that language and that sense of safety to talk about what's really going on for us.
Yeah, and another thing I just remembered to your question was one of the most fantastic experiences I've had, and I'm still having, is working on the shop floor. Because sometimes when you work with factory workers, they are like virgin in the sense that they haven't done all the courses that have existed ever under the sun, and they haven't even had a chance to have access to self-awareness or self responsibility, any of that. Some of the most amazing sessions I have ever had is with people who, from the age of 20 up to the age of 60, who are institutions in any organization, come up with these incredibly intelligent statements as they're going through this. And then they'll come up and say, Louise, I have been a terrible father all my life. I have been a jackal to my son. I can't believe I've done this, but now I have a chance to turn this around. It's like, oh my God, yes, you know, and they're not afraid to say things like that because they don't have that filters of, like, sometimes in top leadership, I should this and I should that, and there are no shoulds. We're all learners, basically. So beautiful work. So if you take it through the whole organization, it's, I mean, obviously it's a chance for an organization to be healthier.
I just got goosebumps. That's such a beautiful example of how profound the change, that insight, being given that perspective and that language and that, accessible way of talking about what's really going on and understanding our behaviors and tendencies more consciously, just so profound. I think on that note, we'll round up and just say, Louise, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute delight to connect with you, to understand your work and just see the incredible impact that it's already having. A really inspiring session. Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to staying in touch with you as human leaders.
Oh yes, human leaders, and thank you so much. I will, because I love the work you're doing, and thank you to everybody who's on the call, and please reach out. Really, it's such an utter pleasure to work with you all. And Alex and Sally, I admire you so much. Really, you're a combination of a dolphin would be a dolphins and giraffe together.
It might be the best compliment I've ever received. I love that.